Hey, speaking of a weird part of history, good article on the from a person. Let's see, what is it? What is the name? Rani Baker. Uh, wrote an article on the video game crash of 1983. Did the video game crash of 1983 even really happen? Which is a slightly like, yeah, it's one of those, like, it's an attention grabbing title, right? This is a really interesting article because I was already a bit of a skeptic, I guess, of the crash. It kind of, like, I remember growing up, and it always gets billed as this like legendary event. Oh my god, the video, someone called it like someone said people basically treat it like it's the 9/11 of video games. And it's like, the more you look into it, the more it's like, are you really? I don't know. Like, it's very it's very mythologized, I guess. And I've been pretty upfront with, like, whenever I bring it up, like, well, technically, yeah, it's not. If it was anything, it was an American console market crash. In Japan, I mean, 83 was the year the Famicom was released, just about. And if you look at, especially because I think this is a thing, this is a problem I see with a lot of game discourse and, like, gaming history kind of discussion, is that there is an immense console bias. I guess just because they were more mainstream. But there was an immense console bias in the way that people talk about game history. So, like, being someone who's also really into, like, PC gaming history, I look at it, I'm like, I mean, games just kind of like computer games, PC games, DOS, Amiga, Commodore 64, Atari 8-bit. Right, Apple II. They just kind of they kept on trucking. Like, there was basically no disruption in those years for those markets. I mean, the early '80s. I'll bring up sometimes the very underrated contributions to gaming by the UK. A lot of that happened on the PC in the '80s. In the early '80s, I did a video forever ago about Bandersnatch. That happened in, like, oh god, Imagine Software. When was that? Mid early '80s. Like, no, they had a booming, thriving market at that time. Like, very competitive in terms of, like, software, at least. And this article kind of even goes a little further, and it sort of claims, with some pretty decent evidence to back it up, that the console market crash is like a little, even that is like a little, it's not the full picture. So an interesting, basically what happened, what seems more likely, or what seems more, a more accurate reading of history, is that Atari fucked up. Atari exploded, basically. Sort of. Basically. They basically take, so it's like in 1982, the retail video game console market was pulling in $3.2 billion. And then the next year, or in 1983 or 1984, that number was $800 million. Oh my god, huge! Oh my god, the market crashed. Well, apparently 80% of the 3.2 billion, it's about $760 million of that, was just Atari. It was just Atari. They had 80% of the market. And what else happened in 1984? They had a new owner, Jack Tramiel, I don't know how you pronounce that, from Commodore, who shut down cartridge development. They just stopped selling cartridges. They started just focusing on the home computer market as opposed to the console market. They just stopped. There wasn't really... Yeah, and something else I didn't realize is the idea of the overproduced Pac-Man and E.T. sales. Overproduced, undersold. Pac-Man apparently sold really well. I didn't know this. And E.T., the window that it released in, it was literally impossible. It was literally impossible for E.T. to have actually affected the sales, because it came out in like December. What's the year? Christmas 1982. It came out Christmas 1982. So like literally impossible. And they say this is the same month as the December 7th shareholder meeting and earnings report, which first started to tank the Atari stock. It is literally impossible for ET to have affected, wrong affected, it should have been an A, Ranny Baker, to have affected the stock price at the beginning of 1983. It's not how stocks, business quarters, or earning assessments work. So, hey, why did the stock tank? Well, it turns out that the Atari CEO at the time, who was about to be replaced, by the way, that was foreshadowing, Ray Kassar, was just hardcore insider trading, pulling a Yuji Naka, sold 5,000 shares of the company, made a fuck ton of money, and then got, I believe, indicted for insider trading. So, yeah. What's funny about this is that I still get to... It's actually... What's a shame, what's a real shame, is that when people focus on all these kind of like mythical parts of the games crash, is they forget the real hilarious reality. The truth, which is that... And it's not even a difficult truth to swallow, which is that Atari is like a terrible company who was always run badly in the game space and basically only got where they were by being early to the market. Did you know? Did you know that Atari, like, I fucking put the timeline together for like, I knew these dates and stuff, but I was like, Pong was like 1972, 1971. The Atari 2600 was 1977. Excuse me. 77. It took them 6 years to act on Pong's success. You know what they were doing during that time? Pinball, baby! Pinball! Which, to be fair, was like pretty lucrative at the time, but it's like, you didn't... What? And a lot of that actually had to do with the fact that, like, they just spent like 5 years... It's so weird when you read the timeline. They started development on what would eventually become the 2600, and like they made it. They had like the product, and then they spent like fuck it, let's just spend like 4 years just looking for like a distributor, manufacturer. Not a big deal. We got the pinball thing. That's gonna last forever. And just so many, like, God, Atari has such a bizarre history. I'm going to do a video at some point on Atari's history and, like, all these fucking weird decisions that they made. God, what a lightning in the bottle company. What a fluke of a company. And now all they have to trade on is just their name, because people, oh yeah, they're like the Pong people, like that's what people know them as now. Sell blood, you fucks! Sell off the blood license to someone! God, I have this fantasy of buying all the Atari token. Hey, remember like episode 8 of this podcast when I talked about Atari token and the Atari hotels? which are real things that they're trying to do. I have this fantasy of like, because the Atari token, it was like every other shitcoin where it just, which by the way, the Atari token was their Atari's attempt. So the CEO is this like random French guy who loves crypto, and he was like, I'm gonna make a cryptocurrency, and it went about as well as you would expect, and it's going for like 0.0000001 cents for like a single Atari token. I'm like, what if I just spent like $20 and bought up the majority of the Atari token? The majority of the Atari token supply. What if I just bought it all? And like what would that give me? Some kind of position? Would I become some sort of majority stockholder in the company, and then I just have this fantasy, like I would want to write like a movie script about this, randomly buying this shit coin that happens to like give you like a million, like a some sort of position of authority at the company, and and trying to like negotiate it, like, okay, I'll sell you it back, but I want blood. I want to bargain for the blood IP. I want to sell it. I want to buy it. That's like my dream. I'm not taking anything else. I forget what other stuff they own. I don't care. I don't care about that. I want blood, goddammit. Yeah, so interesting article. There's a couple other things that they go into with lots of common apparently, this is really fun. Here's another thing. Nintendo was looking for a let's see, where is the point where they talk about it. Nintendo was looking for a distributor slash like manufacturer. There we go. Where is it? Yep. Nintendo was looking for a distributor for the Famicom in the early 80s to distribute it internationally. And Atari was like one of the people who was like in the running for it. It could have been the Atari Entertainment System. It could have been that, or at least been like the distributor or something like that. The Nintendo Atari, I don't know. Excuse me. And guess what? During the 1983 Consumer Electronics Show, Atari saw that the Donkey Kong was running on a Coleco Adam computer, who was one of their competitors. And they were like, well, fuck you, Nintendo. Fuck you. And then they did the same. It's funny because they basically, it's really poetic actually, because that's how Nintendo became like the dominant console manufacturer worldwide. And then Nintendo did the exact same thing Atari did when they turned down the deal with Philips, and Philips went to make fucking PlayStation with Sony. It happened again, and Nintendo made their biggest competitor. And they fucked themselves over because the N64 had to use cartridges instead of discs. It's maddening. I love video game history. It's so funny. It's so funny. Yeah, a couple. Let's see. Yeah, the idea of like, oh, there's too many consoles, and they said something that was kind of like, I thought about it, and I was like, that actually makes a lot of sense. Most of the consoles that people point out, let's be honest, there were not many competitors. It's like, you know, it's like the fucking Ouya, right? Like. There was definitely more space in the console market at that point because, you know, it was a new market and everything. People were vying to get a share of the market, but Atari controlled 80% of the market. There's not a lot of room left for other people. All these like little, the Intellivision, ColecoVision, those are maybe the ones that people remember, but there's a million random little ones that like, yeah, no, I think they had like fucking Mattel had a something like that. Yeah, and it's like, yeah, the Mattel, yeah, the Mattel was in television. The Mattelvision, the Fairchild, the Bally Astrocade, the Odyssey 2. A lot of these, there's some cool things on these, right? They're kind of cool. They are kind of cool, but they are not super significant players in the game, especially as time wore on. So, yeah, fascinating, interesting article. I'd recommend. I've sort of gone over a lot of it, but the a lot of just debunking a lot of the myths of the game's crash, and I would recommend it'll be linked below, as always. It'll be linked below if you're curious about reading it. I would recommend it, and kind of the conclusion is that that I drew out of it was that really it was Atari just kind of stopped. I mean, they say about it as much, basically, like, yeah, console sales went down because no one was making console games. That the market just stopped being there. It was really less of a crash and more of a blip, I guess. More of a like a weird little diversion. I don't know. It's so fun. I don't know. I wonder where this comes from. I guess that there's like, like I said, a console bias, a severe console bias when people talk about gaming history. But like, is that really like it? Like, there's so many. I think people just. I don't know where the story came from. I don't know where the story came from, but it was like. Yeah, it's that this was some like it might honestly. Hey, I'm willing to maybe it was really just maybe we could chalk it all up to big fucking nerds are over dramatic about stuff and they want to make something sound really big and important and dramatic, so they call it the Great Video Game Crash of 1983 with like 100 asterisks behind it. Yeah,